everybody, and welcome to this very special edition of Mind the Gap, making education work across the globe, with me, Emma Turner, and Tom Sherrington, who is going to tell you why it is such a special episode.
Okay, well, hello everybody. This is episode 100. Da, 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 da. And it's also nearly bang on our 5th anniversary since we started. So we've done 100 episodes in 5 years, which is incredible. We started in June 2020 and we're still going.
So it seems like yesterday and forever all at the same time. It still feels like we're at the beginning. It still feels quite shiny. But when I had a little scroll through everybody we've had on and everything we've talked about, it's actually a completely different edgy world that we started in, because obviously we started in the thick of lockdown, for starters.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons we were doing it. There wasn't much else going on for people. And it's a coincidence for me. I mean, maybe it isn't a coincidence, but it overlaps with a lot of 5th anniversaries for me in May. One of them was publishing the Walkthroughs first book that we did, and then also the Walkthroughs membership that we set up. We got our first member in May 2020. So, and then we were doing this. So it's a lot of like, must be COVID, let's get doing stuff, and there's a kind of energy and momentum around it then. And I feel like that's probably the reason. I mean, we may not have done it otherwise. I mean, I've been looking at the list of episodes, and it's fantastic. I mean, don't worry, everybody, we're not going to go through them one by one. Episode 1, episode 2, but the list is pretty amazing. And right at the beginning was Richard Gerver, who was our first episode, and he was like one of the people you were straight in saying we have to talk to Richard. So since he kicked us off, what were the reasons why you were so keen to talk to Richard? I didn't know him at all at that point, really, but I do
Well,
now, obviously. But what?
many reasons. He's local to me, so I know him. He's based over in Derbyshire, and so he's an East Midlands lad, shall we say, and also my unofficial mentor in all things education and leadership. But he works or has worked as a head teacher, very successful head teacher, kind of boundary pusher, quite I would say maverick, because that implies being reckless, but a very forward-thinking educator, likes doing things differently, and has now moved into a space where he is advising leaders and leading change management, not only within education, but with huge global companies. So has this kind of bird's eye view of what leadership is in education, what it is in other sectors, and what it could be, and what lessons we could learn. And he's also a thoroughly decent chap as well, which is why I wanted to have him on, because he's absolutely so engaging. If you've never heard him speak and you get to hear him speak, what a treat, because he's one of the most talented public speakers from education that I've ever seen. He's absolutely marvelous. So that was my reasoning for having him on.
Yeah, and it feels like a while ago. And then there are some other people I was looking at, like in 2020. So talking to Mark McCourt, for example, who's now back in a sort of CEO of a MAT role I've seen, but he's a bit of a legend. Last year, he walked from Land's End to John O'Groats, which is just absolutely brilliant. Raising money,
And he,
charity, and what an inspiration. But he's like, again, it feels like time has flown since we spoke to him.
oh, I love Mark, and he wrote the most amazing blog. I think it was either last week or the week before, about curriculum
Yeah.
design and challenge, um, and how we shouldn't be sort of dumbing down or diluting the curriculum in any way for children. Absolutely fantastic blog. Almost gave it a standing ovation by myself in my office when I read it. It was one of those where you go, yes, yes. But yeah, absolutely brilliant. And
Yeah, it's such a,
I'm so glad he's hung up his walking boots and picked up his laptop again to be back in education, because I think had he retired as he threatened to do, it would have been such a great loss to education. So I'm so glad he's back in, and his voice is being heard, because he's not only was he a stunning guest, but continues to make a huge contribution to education. So he was a barnstormer of a guest for me.
Yeah, and I mean, we've had a few maths people on, and he's like, I mean, I recommend revisiting that one actually because he's one of those people that, to me, is responsible for some pretty foundational concepts in how I've learnt to understand learning. And he may say that his ideas traced to other people. He's a humble kind of man, but to me, like ideas to do with recency and cue. I know I've talked about it, but when I read that about recency and cue, I just thought that was such a fantastic uh, set of ideas around, for example, how maths can be seen easier than it is when you've just been taught it. And so you've
Mm.
got to sort of take away the recency effect and say, well, can you still do it later? And also the queuing is sort of, these questions are all multiplying fractions. And then here's, but whereas when you take away the queue and the children have to work out what the operations are to do a problem and, those ideas. So it's all about like increasing difficulty and challenge within maths, within the same sort of set of numbers and operations. And anyway, I just thought that was absolutely brilliant.
I, I
I
still
mean,
find his book, Teaching for Mastery, that teacher, and I will waft it until the end of my career. Teaching for Mastery was my first dalliance really with kind of really getting to grips with cognitive science. Although it's a maths book, it is and it isn't. This kind of the second half of the book is purely about mathematics. But that first half of the book, if you want to actually understand how learning happens, how mastery happens, what learning actually looked like. The first part of that Teaching for Mastery that Mark wrote is still my go-to, which is why, for anybody who's watching the video version, it is on my special shelf that is just behind. He's on the special shelf.
it's on mine too, but I'm not going to faff around trying to get it off the shelf.
Where? You're just there.
No, that's good. So it's funny because I feel like when we started, we were kind of a little bit profiling books and authors. We don't always do that, but it was like quite a good sort of because we were sponsored by John Catt at that time, so we were sort of promoting books generally was kind of the idea. Um, but I've always liked the fact that our golden rule has been we only invite people who don't ask to be invited.
Oh,
And
I should
literally
have three
already this
today. Three. Three people today have said, "Will you have me on?" And I'm thinking,
yeah,
oh,
two for me this week, one on LinkedIn and one on like literally and I was thinking, no, like you've broken the rule already. I can't invite you.
invite
Because
only.
anyway, I mean, it's our show, so I guess we're kind of a bit precious about that. But I mean, I don't know if I'm going to say another person who, again, early on was brilliant to get on, and I really love the fact that I've met her several times since, which is Patrice Bain.
Oh, I love her.
And she's become the sort of stalwart of research ed events. And in fact, next year she's hosting a research ed event in St. Louis. And I'm going to go. I can't wait. But she's a real powerhouse. I love the fact that she's like a practitioner first and foremost, and she's all her ideas are rooted in her experience as a leader of an elementary school and getting parents on board and helping
Mm.
them to support their children through retrieval practice and her books which she wrote a book with Pooja Agarwal but now she's done her own ones and they're just brilliant and so I love the fact that there's a kind of missionary zeal when she talks at a research ed event or something like that. She's got this kind of this power of like it matters. This changes people's perception of themselves. They know stuff and they can learn it. They can learn things and they feel like school is for me. And the parents can start to see my child is succeeding at school. And she just tells it without such passion. You think, yeah, you have this. That's what I love about her. And she's so generous to other people as well.
Oh, I was about to say she's one of the most professionally polite and dignified educators that I know. She's always lifting other people. She never forgets when somebody's done something or said something. She always credits people. She's so generous and so helpful to everybody, whilst also being phenomenally brilliant, super sharp, and like you say, has this real energy around what she's trying to do with her work. And I absolutely adore her. She's every time Patrice posts, I'm like, good, something brilliant to read. And she's so wise in what she does, and so professionally polite and generous. And I think we could all learn a lot from the way Patrice not only conducts her professional work, but conducts her professional life as well. She's a diamond.
Which has this really cool story of being sort of selected to be part of this program, which led to this paper that came out in 2007, where researchers came to her classroom and studied the impact of what they were doing. And so it's sort of, she was saying, how lucky am I to be involved in that as a practitioner level? But then obviously, that's that, and that is brilliant. That set of studies that they did there.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I think so many. We in 100 episodes, there's just so many people, but there are a couple who, for me, like the kind of the giants. I'm going to cover talk about the giants. And the first one really was Doug Lemov, and we certainly should get him back on again. Because he his episode. I remember he was in Albany at home in the US, and it was snowy in the background, and it was like he just was. It was just so intense but brilliant the way he was. When he communicates about what he believes, there's no diluting it. He's just it's hard. It's almost hard to compare anyone with it. He's so like committed. It matters so deeply that children learn and learn to have a voice, and they all deserve to have a voice. So I feel like over the first 5 years, a number of times I've got involved in defending Teach Like a Champion as if it needs defending, but from people who characterize Doug and Teach Like a Champion as some kind of like regime which is oppressive. You just think you just have no idea. Like really, I think those people who say those things just it's not that. It's all about making every child feel like they matter, and just when you listen to them, and you have to honor what they've said. And I love that. I just think it's epic that episode. I've played it several times. I just think it's so it's moving. Really, it's also intellectually interesting, but it's got this like boom. I love it.
And his work in sports coaching and all of the thinking around that as well is so fascinating. And I had like a two worlds collide moment recently. So I walked into a room at home and there was a Doug Lemov book that I hadn't bought, and my husband is an athletics coach and he bought it to look for it. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is like literally two worlds are colliding here. I can't cope. But yeah, the work that Doug also does around sport and coaching and the developing of the thinking around that is equally fascinating. Um, and the correlation between school and sport is
Yeah.
endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, he has that interesting perspective, and you could debate about how closely related they are, but obviously, one thing can learn from the other, and all the rest of it. So, and the other big hitter, you have to just acknowledge some people are the big hitters. Was obviously Dylan William, and that was a kind of on in the back of a kind of pretty classic run of three people that we had in a row, which were really gave this sort of um, Cogsci sort of meet. First one was Efrat first. Then was Dylan William, and after that we had Sarah Cottingham, and they were like one after the other. It's like, yeah, this is getting right into the detail, and each one of them is really precise about what they're saying. And I feel like I've got a blog post actually where I've pasted those three in to say, look, this is like a sort of trio of genius here. And Dylan was it's like a sort of quote fest. Writing it down. Everything he says is like, yeah, nice one, or I'll borrow that, or yeah, I'm going to remember that. And the subtle distinction between, say, well, not necessarily it's that subtle, but the clear distinction, I should say, between formative assessment, responsive teaching, and say assessment for learning and all those terms. It's it's um it's brilliant. I love it. Sometimes that clarity of language, that precision of thinking is what we don't always have. And it's the same with Sarah, her whole thing about expertise and I know it's just brilliant. So I don't know, do you remember that run?
That triumvirate of absolute magic was still one that I go back to. And if anybody says to me, oh, where should I start with the podcast? It's always that chunk, those three. It's when I think about, like you say, the absolute gems that were dropped in those three episodes. If you just listened to those three and kind of really got to grips with the content of those three podcasts, wow, that's so much kind of edu food for thought and potentially ideas to transform and enhance practice. And I've gone back to them time and time again, and every time I listen to them, I hear something different, or I hear a bit that I missed before. And it's like, listen, this is so sad. It's like listening to a favorite album. You go back, oh, I'll just play that one again. I really like that one.
Well,
Although
yeah.
I must admit, when I was talking to Dylan, that whole thing that was running through my head, my internal monologue was, don't say anything stupid. Don't say anything stupid. The entire time. So I'd got that running, trying to be really prepared. Yes, Dylan, yes, I concur. And really, I was just thinking, don't say anything stupid. Don't make yourself look like an idiot.
So sometimes my wife catches me listening, and she goes, "What are you listening to yourself on the computer?" I go, "Well, I'm not really. I'm listening to the episode, believe it or not. I'm actually interested in what they're saying, and I want to listen back to it. But it's not like she's just, she can hear my voice coming out of the kitchen or something. It is a bit odd, I guess. But and if you don't enjoy doing listening to the thing that you're making, I guess what you wouldn't do it. But it's been, there's been a lot of different types. And I think what I quite like about, and then you just look at the back catalogue, you've got people who are, you know, researchers in academics and other people who are primarily frontline practitioners. And everyone brings a kind of personal passion to it. I mean, it's almost a universal theme that you've got people who exude a kind of personality. People like Vic Goddard, who just like Howell Roberts, who's just one of the most incredible um, I don't know, educationalists. He just brings things alive the way he talks about things, and he's funny. And Alom Shah. I mean, you can just go on. But Sufyan's episode is one I know a lot of people have talked about. Sufyan Sadiq. That was in April 2023, and the way he characterized the whole challenge of teaching children in a community which has got like serious deprivation. He talks about those sorts of things. He feels like poverty and the way it affects people in a very direct way is under kind of discussed. Yeah, so I love it when you get people like that on who just bring this sort of emotional pull, which makes you feel like it all matters so much. So it can get a bit dry, a bit nerdy talking about cognitive science because it all seems like it's a nice little experiment. But when you think, no, this is the stuff which makes you teach better, which helps those children that Sufyan's talking about, it's making that connection. And I hope hopefully that's what we've been trying to do over the last 5 years.
I do feel like not only do I look when I look at the video thumbnails, think, oh my God, that's the most. Imagine if that was an entire staff of one school. Can you imagine if that was your actual staff of your school? But also it's like you said, there's that balance of people who are looking at the detail and people who are looking at the motivation. And it's that balance of head, heart, detail, research, lived experience, specialist thinking that if you listen to it as a whole, I think gives it a really rounded view of why educators do what they do in the way that they do it. This is why we teach in this way. This is why we structure our support systems for children in this way. This is why we address behaviour in this way, or this is why we support our communities in this way. I think the big narrative around it, hopefully around the podcast, is that it's not just one thing. It is actually all of those facets of education with the specialists in those fields sharing their wisdom with us. I have learned so much. It's the best CPD for me.
Yeah.
Just sitting here letting other people's wisdom wash over me. It's absolutely wonderful. And I'm just looking at there. How can we not mention Rob Coe?
Well, we just haven't got round to him yet. I know.
It's just on my screen thinking, oh my goodness, we had Rob Coe on as well. I mean,
And and very early on, Mary Might and so on. And there's a danger when you start listing them, people that you won't list everybody. So if people go, I think
oh, we loved everybody.
be
Everybody.
random about it. I think I'm going to focus on the most recent person because I feel like I listened to this through again just the other day. Bron Ryrie Jones, who's the previous episode, And she's someone who, you learn so much from her every time. We've had her on a couple of times actually, and she had this sort of framing, which in the last episode about um, sort of high, I don't know what language she used, high level concepts or sort of foundational concepts about teaching, and how for some things, like I was going on about this teacher who kept on saying, do you get, does that make sense? Does that make sense? And she was saying like this, there's no technique which fixes that until you've really got them to sort of think about the high level concept of, and I love the way she framed it. She said, did you want to check everyone's understanding, or did you think, was that what you were asking when you were saying, um, does that make sense? Did you want to know if everyone had made sense? So like, who were you directing that at? And did you find out if they had made sense? Because the obvious thing is no. So you think until the teacher realizes that their sort of habit is not delivering the thing they think it's delivering or has got any chance of doing it, the technique you might use to do instead is just like neither here nor there. So, and I was thinking that sounds obvious, but I don't think I've emphasized that enough in the work that I do. Probably, I would say that if, high level concept this and then technique there, underneath. And I think that's something which I'm going to think about more because I think it's really all good ideas sound obvious when you hear them, but it wasn't as obvious. It wasn't obvious enough to me. Put it that way.
I'm laughing because whenever I do my training at the moment, I talk about what I've kind of named the five golden rules of teaching. And as Bron was talking, it was this idea of these overarching principles that then, when you understand those, you can kind of dig down into, well, why would you do that, which underpins that, and why would you do it that, which underpins that. So as she was speaking, I was kind of clapping along to myself, going, "Oh, good, I'm saying the right thing."
Which is why it chimes with something like Rosenshine's Principles of Instruction, where he doesn't list techniques per se.
Yeah.
He does he's listing principles, and you have to kind of flesh it out with techniques. And I think sometimes people have only learnt it at a sort of technique level, and so then it becomes a bit distorted because they've lost track a bit of the overarching thing, especially when you're trying to talk about all the students doing it. And I was thinking today actually that there's sort of maybe one of the levers we need to pull more in teaching, training, and PD is the kind of deep purpose of things and why it matters so much. So I was thinking today, like I might rehearse this a bit more. Sort of, if you want every child to talk because you think it matters that their voices are heard and therefore they can practice saying things, and no child matters less than anyone else, why wouldn't you make absolutely sure that every single child is speaking in the class when you've asked them to turn and talk or whatever? Why would you allow some children not to because you just sort of they didn't matter enough or that type of thing? And I'm thinking some teachers they I think that sort of real it matters that much. It's not just something you cut a corner on, because why would you cut a corner on a kid learning? That's the sort of thing I was thinking. That might sound a bit ultra, but I do think sometimes people just cut corners too casually, and you think, no, that child isn't doing what you've asked. Why don't you mind?
I,
That
I
sounds mean, but it's true.
I always tell this story about when I was observing a lesson and I was sat next to this little chap in year five, and the teacher was doing this kind of choral response, and then they were doing mini whiteboards and everything, and he just wasn't joining in. And I said, "You're not joining in today?" And he went, "Nah."
That's just great. I love it.
To speak to his teacher at the end, and I was sitting next to this little chap here. Is there any reason that he doesn't like to join in? Is there a special need underlying there? Is there some? And she went, no. And so he just decided for himself that, oh, not for me today. That's I'm not gonna bother.
No, that's the honesty, and I feel like sometimes that's how everyone feels, but you just have to overcome it. I
Nah.
tell you the thing
What's
that made me laugh playing back episode 99 was I was thinking this should be like a t-shirt or something. You said, um, I've never seen a man look so miserable with a tambourine. because that was the whole school signal for attention. And he just is like absolutely hating it. Like,
That everyone had sucked his entire soul out of his body.
I was with you on that. I was thinking, man, do not make me do it. But that type of thing is pretty funny. I mean, when the whole school rules and someone's become so awkward for somebody, it's pretty painful. So look, I mean, we could. I think we've done it. We've sort of topped and tailed the list. It's I'm proud of it. Looking through, I was thinking, wow, he did all of those. And of course, with John Hutchinson coming in while I was away, I think he did like something like 13 episodes together, which is a higher output rate than we were doing before. So that's pretty impressive. Um, it's fantastic, isn't it? So we'll have to sort of see where it goes. I feel like to some extent, I feel like we have permission now to re-invite people we've had before because that was one of our rules.
Mhm.
Because people are 5 years old thinking, God,
Well,
what's happened to me since then?
the Karate Kid has just released the Legends video, the Legends in cinemas. So maybe we need to have like the Karate Kid Legends, like we have to have Mind the Gap Legends.
Oh, listen, I'm going to tell you a story about that. So last week, I was in Canada in a amazing. I had this amazing thing that happened, which was I had a week spare because I kept it free because I just wasn't sure if I was traveling somewhere, but it turned out not to be. So I put a thing out on Twitter saying I'm free in the first week of June. Just anyone want me to do some work with them? And the first people that got in touch was these fantastic people called Scott and Jess from Evergreen District, school district in Manitoba, and it's based in a small town called Gimli, which is um, on Lake Winnipeg, huge lake, and it's a small town. It reminded me of like the town in the Truman Show. It was like really small and but really beautiful, and a big lake out front of it. But they have a cinema there, and has one film in every week, and it's on at 7:30 every day. That's it. So one showing, one film, and the film that was on was The Karate Kid, and I went to see it on my own. And about an hour in, I woke up.
Oh my goodness. Was it the original or the Legends one?
It's the very latest one,
Oh,
the Legends, and I fell asleep and I woke up, and I thought that's it. This isn't this film for me. So I just went home and looked up the plot on Wikipedia to see what happens at the end. But
original.
yeah, it's
Boy looks like he's not going to win fight. Boy has fight. You can probably write the end.
it's all just very cliche. And I'd missed Mission Impossible, which was the week before, and I still haven't seen that. But anyway, I digress. I mean, that though was an amazing thing. So I tell you that for me to see to go to a place like that, and well, I loved what they were doing there. So they're like a bit of an oasis. There's a kind of a group of leaders, a group of school leaders, about like 8 schools, and the superintendent are running this program there, which is involving, teach like a champion, walkthroughs, step lab, and that type of coaching approach. And we went around the schools as the lessons, and it was like you can see really teachers really working on stuff, and they have got like outcomes now from like in maths in high school, which is right at the top of the whole um, stuff of the whole state. It's not they don't call them states. Well, I forgot what they're called in Canada now. Just well, anyway, and also reading. Like they've really like nailed reading, and they've got like reading schools and screening stuff, which is like so. There's like the stuff they're doing is like making a big impact, and people are noticing from the rest of district. So it's like the rest of the area, and it's like wow, this is exciting, So there's a school which is trying this stuff out. There's a group of schools. And when you see where it is, you think, is that Gimli? Is this a tiny little place? But it's like, it doesn't matter where it is in the world. It's doing the business, and the kids in that area are getting a great education. It's fantastic. So exciting.
So you get to go there. I got to go to the Premier Inn in Watford where the heating was jammed on. Oh, how we differ, Mr. Sherrington.
Well, I've done my fair share of premieres. It's all very good. So what else have you been up to then, apart from,
Lots of work around um, this kind of 5 golden rules of teaching. Lots of curriculum design, and I'm actually involved in a really exciting project at the moment with a large group of schools designing a curriculum for primary schools using Sarah Cottinghat's Alsa Bells. work. So the whole curriculum is designed around
Wow.
Asperger's model. So that is absolutely fascinating. Um, Doing that kind of work, lots of work around continuous provision across Key Stage 1, as lots of schools are finding that children's experiences in reception need to be built on in terms of the pedagogy moving through with them because of the nature of the needs of the current reception cohort. And I don't know if you saw the UNICEF data that was published this week about areas where children are in most areas that are most disadvantaged are where children who are in EYFS have the lowest levels of good level of development, the lowest percentage of good levels of development. And so many schools that I work with are looking at ways of supporting children through into Key Stage 1 by continuing that continuous provision model through with them, because so many children have entered reception over the last couple of years with challenges with speech and language, with personal, social, emotional control, executive function, attention, just because of the nature of the preschool experience that they had during lockdown, because our current reception children are our lockdown babies. So lots of my work is around EYFS and Key Stage 1 at the moment, which is endlessly fascinating. And there's a real hunger out there for Key Stage 1 practitioners to really transform their pedagogy. But what I'm doing as well is underpinning that with child development and science of learning. So kind of blending the two,
I'd love
which
to
is
see what that looks like in practice. I mean, it's the only example I've come across directly in England was the St Michael's in Albourne in Wiltshire, which is they're actually presenting at the walkthroughs a conference on their work, and they have this fantastic continuous provision up to the end of key stage year two. But what they have this fascinating thing. The way it works is they have a thing called tutor table. So as one of the rotations, like in the activities that their children are doing, is there's like 6 or 7 children. I think it's like a quarter of the class. It might be a third of the class. Um, Sit round a horseshoe with the teacher for like an hour to do maths. So the teacher can teach them really interactively, responsibly, and sit, and so they can see what they're doing in real time. And they do another session of writing in the week as well, like that. So everyone gets like these tutor time periods, but everyone else in the class is doing. They have to do a design, a sort of creative thing, a building thing, a writing thing, and it's still very structured, but it's sort of they say it works really well because you notice kids learning issues much more quickly because you're on it.
There's so many ways to do it and do it beautifully. And there is a bit of a misconception that if children are playing, it's not academically rigorous enough. But I always tell the story about, I think I mentioned it to you before, when I went in and these year one children were doing clay and mixing the slip by themselves, just a little group of 5 on this table, mixing the slip, putting their own aprons on, and knocking the clay and knocking the. And I went over and I said, what's happening over here, guys? And I genuinely thought they were going to say, I'm making a snail, or I've made a ball. And one of them turned around and I almost pig snorted laughing because it was just so brilliant. He went, I'm making a sculpture in the style of Barbara Hepworth. And then I
Brilliant.
went over to another corner and there's a little boy putting blocks out in a row. And
Mm.
year one, and I went over and I said, "Oh, what's happening over here with the blocks?" And he said, "Oh, I'm making a road map of Scarborough." And I was like, okay, why Scarborough? And he said, oh, because these are all in a line because Scarborough's a linear settlement. But where we live in a town in the middle, and that's a nuclear settlement. So when I make the nuclear one, it'll be round. And I just wanted the cameras to be there and say, whoever says continuous provision and play-based learning isn't academically rigorous needs to give the head a wobble, because in this classroom, it was just phenomenal. And every single child I went to could tell me what they were thinking about, what they were learning. Their use of materials was fantastic. Their use of tools was amazing. Their writing and their maths outcomes, the language that was going on. It was absolutely marvelous and not at all like you would expect and it was a mixed 1-2 class, not at all what I expect a Key Stage 1 class in many places to look like, but it is just a real area of development for the schools
I
that
think
I'm
it's
in.
interesting. I think that like a lot of these things, you have to get the emphasis right. There's no doubt that everyone needs to learn, learn phonics and learn to read and everything. I mean, I never go to a school where you don't see that. It's like
No,
it's
they still do that. They still do direct
yeah,
teaching.
yeah,
They
of
still do.
course, yeah. They're going to obviously when you hear that, like you're saying, then it's not like they're not also doing other things
Yeah.
like
No,
really sort of sound like reading, teaching
yeah.
every day.
He
And so, but
didn't
then you've got like,
magically know about Barbara Hepworth by himself.
well,
Somebody
no,
taught him about
you may
that.
have been teed up to say that as a joke, this will
No,
stop. Just say, and this will really blow their mind. And he probably was just making a snail, but
no, so that school, and I've worked with them for a very long time, are absolutely
I
stunning.
think that, well, I think is interesting here is you have to sort of pick up what's generalizable to other places as well. So it's quite easy to. I mean, I've been to loads of schools where they have niche uh, advantages in the sense could just be the group of teachers they have who just happen to be brilliant and so and experienced and mature and knowledgeable, and so there's a kind of notch above, a school where lots of ECTs or turnover of staff and just everyone's sort of learning to teach all the time in a different sort of level. And you're thinking like, could that translate to there? All those sorts of things I find
100%.
interesting.
100%. That is why when I work with other schools, I always take them there because they're one of the schools, they haven't got like a converted Spitfire in the playground and acres of space. They've got like a manky old mobile for one of the classrooms and not quite enough space. And whatever they're doing is hugely transferable. It's not one of those places where you think, oh, well, that's lovely, but we couldn't because
Well, that's good.
it,
That's important,
it's
isn't it?
immensely doable. There's lots of places I could take people that would knock the socks off and they'd go, oh, look at that, and that. But it's not transferable. I think that the one where I went when I was that I worked with, which is so amazing, is because it's you can see how it would and could and does work in a lot of other settings because it's the way that you teach and the why you do it like that and kind of the overarching ideas that you were talking about. Why
Yeah.
would you teach? Why would you teach like that? And when you see how younger children respond in that environment, the flip side of the question is, why wouldn't you teach like that?
No, it's funny. There's things you see like one. I did a thing yesterday, which was a kind of quite a special thing for me, which was there was an event at school in Paisley Academy in Milton Keynes, which was part of the Five Dimensions Trust. And as a trust, they've been working on delivering a Key Stage 3 baccalaureate, like along the lines of the National Baccalaureate Trust model, which I've been, partly involved in for the last 10, 12 years. In fact, I met a guy, Jez Bennett, who's the two of us with John Tomset, we once met on a sort of hotel bar off the A1 because like was between London and York and places, and we agreed to meet there as we're all head teachers at the time. Like let's discuss this idea, and we thrashed out sort of some thoughts, which was really it was great. But like yesterday, this group of kids, year eight, they'd done 2 years of their national baccalaureate, and they all graduated, and it was fantastic. Their school went the whole hog. They'd hired gowns and stuff, so they had gowns with hats, and it was just it looked absolutely magnificent. Johnny Ball was the keynote speaker. I know
As
he's
in Johnny Ball reveals all.
absolutely he's 87. He did half an hour of like maths and geography geekery. It was just epic. It was talking about ancient mathematicians and how they discovered patterns in the earth and the size of the earth and how round it is and all this kind of stuff. It was just superb. But then it was great seeing these kids come up and get their certificates for this thing. And they'd all done a project, a personal project, and they'd all presented it verbally to some teachers. So this group of teachers had listened to 200 presentations between them,
Wow.
and it was superb. I mean, and then some of them, some of the projects they'd chosen were so like eccentric and brilliant. Like this was the whole point of it. Like as one part of your curriculum, you choose something that you care about, that you're interested in. Some of them were like super nerdy about like I think one was about chemical plants and but other, there's all sorts of like interesting topics that they picked, and it was fantastic. And at the end, yeah, anyway, it was just superb, and I just thought how great, like to see something which was an idea and which COVID kind of knocked it on the head quite badly, but then last couple of years people have been getting it was a year of getting ready, and then they launched it a couple of years ago, and then they finally got to the end, and then they're going to develop it through into their Key Stage 4 and 5 and across the whole trust. So it's like, and there's lots of other schools doing that as well. So I thought that was just absolutely fantastic. So I'm probably going to step down from the National Baccalaureate Trust now because I feel like too many, I'm not close enough to the school doing it to really be much use anymore. But I felt like, yeah, if I actually managed to see it over the line, which is pretty good. I was pretty happy about that.
I do love a project that I think that's a really important point. The fact that they've done it right to the end. There's lots of I see lots
Yeah.
of schools start things and it's really hard to actually see it right through to the end because things get in the way, staff change, things happen.
Yeah.
But to actually do a huge, large scale project like that and do it right the way through, you
And
know,
it, and,
awesome.
and, and you need the energy. So I've not met them before, but I know the people who are. No, I met people who like there's an art teacher I think who had driven it as a concept. There's a head of year who'd done it like getting each individual kid to do their projects and hassling them, and there's the head teacher. Like they're all like these sort of inspirational people all the way down the track, sort of like bringing energy. And you think, well, they kind of that's what it takes to sort of if you're really committed to it and you make it happen. So that was pretty exciting. But yeah, hopefully, that will be. I wonder what the status that will be in a few years' time because, with curriculum review, maybe the curriculum review will allow a bit more space for that to take hold. But it's a very much a school-led thing. The government's never been interested. They always panic that it's going to cost them money and stuff. But schools can do the stuff just because they can and they can choose to. And so if you're listening to this and you want to have a national baccalaureate program, you should look it up online, the National Baccalaureate for England. It's pretty awesome. And you can design it for yourself for your own school. It's good.
Fantastic.
So, in terms of like our podcast, we've got another couple of episodes lined up that I know. We have Patrick Cozier's coming. He's the head teacher of the secondary school near where I live, and he's um, he's written a book called Calm Leadership, which is going to be interesting. God knows he'll have needed that in his career. He's been like a head for 20 years now, and resilience to the maximum. Um, and also Bruce Robertson, who I think is probably overdue. I'd say. I'm surprised I haven't had him on before.
Touch. It's one of those ones we keep trying to get on, and then think I've just mentioned about life happening. Things keep happening. So when he
Yeah,
does come, it will be to great fanfare.
I think so. It will be. Yeah, and I mean, I haven't even discussed this with you yet, but I've tons of ideas for who to get on later episodes. Which one of them who has said she'll do it, but I haven't agreed yet, is Anna Stocky, who is a maths professor, and
Laughing because I genuinely thought you were going to say Bridget Phillips.
I don't want to talk to Bridget Phillips on a podcast.
She's
I don't.
agreed to come on. I was thinking, who is it? Is
No, no,
it?
no. Well,
Oh,
and no, what I mean is I'm not saying this without her knowing. I'm not sort of announcing to Anna that she's going to come on a podcast. She said she'd like to do it, um, so that'd be cool. And she's like a real sort of champion of evidence-informed maths practice and a different. She did a great talk at Research
if
Ed.
she's maths, I'm in. I'm
Yeah,
in.
absolutely. She's
I'm
super
there.
nerdy about maths, and so she should be. But anyway, look, let's wrap that up. I think I reckon we could do like a 10-hour marathon going through all the episodes.
Good. We could.
Yeah,
I,
we know we've had. I don't know the exact figures now, but it's a few months ago. It was over 250,000 listens to the episodes we'd had at that point. So I think more recently that we've been getting like close to 3,000 people listening for each one. Is That's just fantastic and exciting. And I meet people a lot who have listened to it, so it means something to them as well. So it's quite exciting, and we we resolve to continue.
I had a lady the other day say, "You've been in my ears." I said, "Have I?" She said, "On every dog walk, you've been in my ears." Thank you, lovely to meet you.
Yeah. Wow. And what's the next exact thing for you? Tomorrow, I'll tell you what mine is. The walkthroughs national conferences tomorrow and the next day, London, Manchester. I love those. It's like a gathering of our clan. So I'm looking forward
Don't ask me what I'm doing tomorrow because you already know. So I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. Tell you what I'm doing another day. I've actually got a full governance meeting tomorrow night. I can tell you that bit about my day tomorrow. But next week, most of the week, I am working on curriculum design with a large uh, trust, which has got sort of 3 hubs nationally, and I've been working on a big curriculum project with them over the last sort of year and a half. So we're just finishing off this year's one and planning for next year's, because we're now moving from curriculum into teaching and learning, so that their teaching and learning approach dovetails absolutely beautifully with the what they're going to teach. So most of next week I'm working with them.
that sounds brilliant. That's dream work. That's fantastic.
Oh, isn't it just? I get to talk primary curriculum design and teaching and learning on a grand scale with people who really want to geek out about it, because they've developed this wonderful team of curriculum experts in all of the 3 hubs. And it's like, get your geek on. It's fabulous. Fabulous.
That's fantastic. Well, look, let's wrap it up there. Let's just say a few thank yous. I mean, I want to thank, obviously, Luke Kemper, our producer of the recent couple of seasons. But also, Alex Sharratt at John Catt, who got us started. Without him, I don't think we'd have a podcast. And all the guests that we've had. I mean, it's been absolutely stunning, and people seem to be keen to talk to us, and we can't thank you enough. But most of all, people listening. I mean, I think it's true to say that if we didn't feel anyone listening, we would have drifted away by now. But the fact that people listen and engage and share their thoughts about the guests and the episodes is fantastic. So thank you to everyone listening, and hope you continue to do so. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a joy. It really is. And it's so lovely when people do say that they've listened, because it's, I never know what to say. If you ever do say it to me, I look slightly shocked because I don't actually know what to say, but thank you for listening. Thank you. So thank you to all the guests. Thank you to the team who've produced it over the years. And thank you to you, Tom, because I love having our regular chats about the world of education. So thank you for your wisdom.
Well, yeah, I mean, this episode in particular, I feel like we've just been talking to each other. Sometimes I forgot that we were actually recording it, but yeah, we were recording it. And yeah, it's nice and it's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we'll wrap it up then for today, and we'll look forward to our next episode, which will be an interview with one of our guests. Thank you again for listening, and happy 100, Mr. Sherrington.
Happy 100.
Thank you for listening to Mind the Gap. I'm Emma Turner, and I've been presenting with my co-host Tom Sherrington. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review, share on social media, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on our YouTube channel, search for Mind the Gap with Tom and Emma, or head over to Spotify for an audio version. This podcast was produced in association with Haringey Education Partnership, and our producer for today's episode was Luke Kemper.